All right. Okay. Alrighty. Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. My name is Brian Scuttle. Uh, my written work, as always, is at www.sonic-cinema.com or at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. And you can also check out the Sonic Cinema podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. It's going to be a very busy, but I think a very interesting rest of 2021. Most of the lineup is actually pretty well set in stone, and I'm looking forward to sharing the episodes with you. It's going to be a fun series of discussions, including one that is going to be a solo entry that I've actually been working on the script for a couple of days now. I think you're going to enjoy it. It is film music related, which is something I love but don't talk about enough. And this one is actually going to be on the music of the or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I hope you tune into that one. I think it's going to be a fun discussion. A bit of house cleaning with housekeeping when it comes to Sonic Cinema. It's been a busy week for reviews, and since the stream on Tuesday, I've posted reviews of The Long Goodbye in the Repertory Reviews series, of the Loki series on Disney Plus, and of the Boys in Red Hats, which is a documentary, as well as the original Space Jam last night, as well as A New Legacy this morning. I will be honest, I did not expect to enjoy Space Jam and New Legacy. And there's still a lot of things I don't like about it, but I actually felt like it. I actually feel like it did use the Looney Tunes very well, even more so than I think we got from them in the 1996 original. And you can read my thoughts on there on Sonic Cinema under film reviews. But next week is going to be busy. I'm basically going to have at least one movie review every day, pretty much. Starting with, as far as older films, I actually have a very special treat. I'm actually going to be doing my first Blu-ray review, and it is for a 1951 movie that is getting a Blu-ray special edition called Flight to Mars. It is in its 70th anniversary. I've always been kind of interested in 50s sci-fi. I haven't gotten into it nearly enough outside of Mystery Science Theater, which actually ties well into the topic tonight for me. But I got this email asking about if I'd be interested in reviewing it, and I said sure. And it actually just came in the mail yesterday, I think. So I'm looking forward to checking out all of the extras, and diving into reviewing not only the film, which I haven't seen, but the extras as well. And I'm really curious to see this. So that review, that's basically what I'm going to be doing on Saturday before I go to work. And the review will be posted Sunday the 18th. On Monday, you will get a review for Wild Eye release called Animosity, which is a 2013 film. On Tuesday, you will get my review of Playing with Sharks, the a National Geographic documentary, played at Sundance earlier this year, and it's going to be on Disney Plus next Friday. On the 21st, you get my review of Joe Bell with Mark Wahlberg. And on the 22nd, you're actually going to get my review of the sci-fi movie from IFC called Settlers. And on Wednesday of next week, I do hope to, on Friday of next week, I hope to be able to share my review of M. Night Shyamalan's Old, which I'm really excited to check out. And all of those will be able to be found on sonic-cinema.com. And I'll share the links on social media as the week goes along. So the subject of today's chat is the idea of cult films, and it's actually a subject that I didn't necessarily think too much about until I decided, it ties in well with my plans for tonight. I usually work on Friday nights, but this week I am off, and I will explain why. So it's funny, when I looked at, when I was doing research for the parody film podcast I did with Robert Yanis Jr. last month, I looked on IMDb, or I looked at Wikipedia, looked at their definitions, and they have pretty good definition. They had kind of a terrible list of what makes up a parody. It feels like a lot of what they did, they include satires as well. And for cult films, I think to a certain extent it's funny because of the fact that I have sort of had a fairly narrow look at what makes a cult film, but it's interesting to figure that some people have sort of wider definitions of cult film. And IMDb, so Wikipedia starts it as a cult film or cult movie, also commonly referred to as a cult classic, is a film that has acquired a cult following. Cult films are known for their dedicated, passionate fan base, which forms an elaborate subculture, members of which engage in repeated viewings, dialogue quoting, and audience participation. Inclusive definitions allow for major studio productions, especially box office bombs, while exclusive definitions focus more on obscure, transgressive films shunned by the mainstream. The difficulty in defining the term and subjectivity of what qualifies as a cult film, mere classificatory disputes about art. The term cult film itself was first used in the 1970s to describe the culture that surrounded underground films and midnight movies, although cult was in common use in film analysis for decades prior to that. I think that's actually a pretty fair and wide variety. And it's funny because of the fact that reading that definition of cult, you can almost look at any fandoms like Star Wars fandom, Harry Potter fandom, Marvel fandom, DC fandom. Any of those big fandoms could be seen as cults, like could qualify those as cult films as well. I think that's a bit. I think it's kind of fair, but at the same time, I also think that you're also dealing with movies that are exceptional box office successes, and I think that's kind of a harder thing to justify when it comes to cult films. When I think of cult films, I think of movies that either failed and found a following afterwards when it comes to financial, were not critically acclaimed, or were either not critically acclaimed or were critically acclaimed, just didn't find an audience and eventually built one out. Or movie, and I like the inclusion of midnight movies, and again, that ties into something I'm doing tonight. A few years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said that we are kind of in an age of having. I think we're going to see a lot more movies that are sort of cult movies than genuine like classic movies along the lines of like your Casablancas, your Citizen Kanes, your Psychos, your North by Northwest, Vertigo. Although Vertigo technically could be considered a cult film because of the fact that it was box office failure, wasn't really critically acclaimed at the time, but it eventually found its audience over time. But also that I think a lot of that had to do with a reevaluation of the film in general. Whereas if you look at something like Showgirls, I don't know if there's been quite that same uh, critical reevaluation, and same with something like The Room, where it's everybody kind of acknowledges that's an awful film, and that's part of its appeal. That really is much more of a midnight movie, I think, than say, and Showgirls is kind of the same way. I do, but at the same time, I do sort of kind of do feel like that we are in an age where a lot of movies achieve a cult status before they even either before they reach a more mainstream acceptability. And I think there are examples of cult films that could be considered in that respect, or movies that just are always going to be niche movies and don't really connect with the larger population. I will say it's like, and I think this came about because two of my favorite films are from one filmmaker, Alex Perez. And while one was a success and one was a failure, it's hard to deny that they're both more cult movies. One of the movies, you see the poster behind me, is The Crow, which was a box office success, relatively speaking, but I think was still considered a cult movie because of the fact that it gradually found its audience over time and eventually has built a reputation of being reasonably well acclaimed, but also still having a relatively limited fan base. Certainly, you would say the fan base for The Crow is not as expansive as it is for Star Wars or Harry Potter. And Dark City is the other one where I do think, it was a critically acclaimed movie, but was also a box office failure. And it's interesting to wonder what might have happened if it had come out after The Matrix. But since it came out over a year before The Matrix, it was a bit ahead of its time. But I think the critical claim of somebody like Roger Ebert, who absolutely loved the film and recorded an audio commentary for the film, which is one of the reasons it became one of my first DVDs to own when I got into DVDs. I think that movie has, over time, gotten a cult following, and it's still not considered quite as mainstream as The Matrix is, but at the same time, I think its reputation has certainly grown over the years, even if it doesn't necessarily expand beyond that initial, even if it doesn't ultimately doesn't extend to a larger social consciousness. A couple movies that I would say, and I got some selections out here to sort of give me a train of thought of movies I'm sort of talking about here. A couple of movies that were not as overly successful with the box office, but built a cult reputation and now are much more beloved, I think. Mike Judge's Office Space, which I'm proud to say I saw in theaters and loved it immediately. And it certainly fits that bill of quotable movies movies that got relative acclaim, and then as people started to tell other people about it, and they found a ability to identify with the main characters in the movie, it grew its reputation. And now I think you could almost make the argument for it to be something that is more popular within the mainstream than it was when it came out in 1999. And I think part of that is because of the fact that there's a universality to its ideas of living in certain job situations, dealing with corporate corporations at your job, and having to struggle with that, what that means. Another one is Robert Reiner The Princess Bride, which it's funny because I've always kind of really loved The Princess Bride, even as a kid. But thinking about it, it really, because it wasn't that overly successful, didn't really get a whole lot of acclaim in 1987, but its reputation over time has grown to where, as my generation has grown up and sort of passed The Princess Bride on to the next generation, it's a movie that's become beloved. And as you can see, it's part of the Criterion collection. And I think that's an important part of why some movies succeed and build out of their initially small bases. But it helps that The Princess Bride is arguably one of the best and most family friendly fantasy films ever made. I mean, I would argue it's even more family friendly than Harry Potter, which the first three films are rated PG. I think as a fantasy, it's got charming elements, but it doesn't feel like a kids movie. And I think that's one of the most important things about its success, is that it's been able to build its reputation, and it's also, like Office Space, it's instantly quotable. Another one that I would say is instantly quotable, and I don't know that would ever really achieve the sort of universality that The Princess Bride has or Office Space has, but certainly it's found its niche, and that is the Coen Brothers' Big Lebowski, which was a critical disappointment after the Oscar-winning Fargo, and was now a big hit for them. But needless to say, it is endured as a movie that its fan base absolutely adores. And I'll admit, when I first saw it in 1998, I was not quite sure what I thought about it. I kind of liked it, but I also was not quite sure what that meant and whether I still felt like it was a good movie moving forward. And but at the same time, it's endured. And the dude abides. You're out, Donnie, you're out of your element. There's so many great quotable lines in that movie. There's so many great performances, and it was actually funny watching The Long Goodbye this week, which is based on a Raymond Chandler movie. You could really, which is based on a Raymond Chandler novel. That and The Big Sleep are the two Chandler adaptations I've seen. And it's funny to see, and I have always known that The Big Lebowski was inspired by Chandler, and you can kind of see why, because of the denseness of the world when it comes to characters and how many oddball characters there are. The Coen Brothers did a really great job of adapting that idea into their own thing. But I mean, at the same time, you look at something like Miller's Crossing, you look at something like Fargo, they've always had a knack for really strong ensembles. And I think that's something that really served them well when they when they were inspired by Chandler for The Big Lebowski. And that was just one of those interesting things I got to recognize. of course, uh, there are few movies that are as polarizing and as controversial and as more cult friendly as David Fincher's Fight Club. It's like you knew at the time that there were certain audiences that absolutely loved it. I was certainly somebody who loved it, not necessarily for the same reason a lot of other people loved it. I just thought it was a terrific film, and you can listen to my class of 1999 discussion with Jacob Belinsky on Fight Club about that. And I think it's one of those things where it's like it was destined to fail and then find its audience. Um, I think that is one of the more interesting ideas of what a cult film is. It's certainly one that's I've recognized over the years and one that I've always enjoyed watching over the years. And I think it's a strong it's a strong distinction in the genre or the subgenre, I guess, or the idea of what this type of film is. Speaking of Roger Ebert, whom I've mentioned here at least once, with regards to Dark City, I think there are a few movies that sort of come close to being a cult film, like the one he did with Russ Meyer in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. That is very much a cult film. I think the fact that it's written by Roger Ebert is part of what gives it that sachet, as well as the fact that it very much plays like an exaggeration of like the 60s hedonism movies and the sort of a weird satire on the Disney or on the idea of going to Hollywood to become a star. And it's one of those things where I really I was taken by it the second I saw it, and I'm looking forward to watching it again in the years to come. It's just such a wild ride. A personal favorite of mine from my youth, sort of along the lines of The Princess Bride, but not quite in the same way. Its cult, I think, came a lot out of the fact that it wasn't available. And you can hear me sort of talk about my feelings on the movie on the Nostalgia Cast podcast episode that I did. And that is, of course, Hal Needham's Rad, which I'm so glad that I own on 4K thanks to the people of Vinegar Syndrome. I had been I was not sure if I was going to necessarily see that movie again because I didn't necessarily know where the VHS was for the longest time. Now that I have a 4K version of it, I no longer need that one. It was just taped off of HBO, so but it was funny to see people come out of the woodwork in support of that movie when it came out last year by Vinegar Syndrome, and I'm glad that it's out. I'm glad that it's part of my life, and it's not a particularly good movie, but it's an entertaining one nonetheless. Definitely something along the lines of a cult movie, I think, and it, this particular filmmaker, you could consider him sort of a cult filmmaker, even though he's gotten more financial success and more critical acclaim. I mean, I don't know that he's actually won an Oscar yet. Actually, now that I think about that, I was going to say he's an Oscar winner, but I don't think he is yet, which is kind of surprising. Maybe this year with French Dispatch is the year for him. But his first film, Ball Rocket, Wes Anderson's crime caper, is one that I definitely would consider a cult film. I think it fills a particular niche. It was very small. It wasn't until Rushmore that people really started to take notice of him as a filmmaker, and then with Royal Tenenbaums and everything else that's come after that, I mean, he is now considered one of the finer American filmmakers, but he still very much has his particular niche of in his particular style of comedy and movies that he makes. And I think if you look at Bottle Rocket, you can see a lot of the DNA of what would come from Wes Anderson. And I'm actually going to be rewatching it as per my 1996 discussion because of the fact that A, I haven't seen it in a while, and B, I'm actually going to be trying to figure out see how much of my top 10 is still my top 10 for that year. And I don't know that Ball Rocket will get on there, but you never know. I love that it was on Martin Scorsese's 10 best list for the 1990s, and I'm curious to rewatch it and see how I feel about with regards to with a basically 25 years of Wes Anderson since then. Another filmmaker who's very much kind of a cult filmmaker on his own in terms of having a particular style, having a particular personality in his films is Richard Kelly. And certainly Donnie Darko is the better known of his films as far as cult films. That's one that I do want to rewatch because I wasn't overly impressed with it when I first saw it. I was a bit behind on the cult, and it just didn't work for me. Now that I've seen his other movies, I'm kind of curious how I will feel about it. The one that I do have, though, is, there are some variety of reasons. I mentioned it in my video review a few months back. Southland Tales, his 2007 film, which, and that one has both the theatrical version as well as the Cannes cut of the film, and I'm still not a fan of the film. I still think it has issues in storytelling and performance that I'm not really ready to sort of let go yet. But I think I appreciate it more now with what has sort of happened over the past 14 years in America in the rearview mirror, and being able to see almost how prophetic Richard Kelly was and how he viewed America, a futuristic America in that time. And it's very, you can definitely see it as it would be an interesting companion piece with Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, which is another movie I would say is a cult movie. But those are two movies that look at futuristic versions of America through the lens of what was going on then, but I think were also prophetic in how the future was going to go. And it's very interesting to watch those movies. I hope that we get Strange Days on Blu-ray or 4K sometime in the future because of the fact that I really have always loved that film. Another one is a more recent version of a cult film, I think, and I think I might get some pushback on this idea, but the fact is, it wasn't that overly successful at the box office, and even if it were, I think it's a very divisive movie, and it actually was just announced to be going into the Criterion Collection yesterday. And that is the Safdie brothers' terrific uncut gems. I personally really loved them. Definitely going to put down for the Criterion. I think it's the Criterion is. It's going to be interesting to see if they can upgrade the image more than the Blu-ray does. And I still need to watch Good Time by the Safdie brothers, and I'm really looking forward to doing that at some point. So I mentioned earlier one of the ideas of cult films are that I think a lot of people really to gravitate towards this idea of what cult films are is the idea of so bad it's good. And basically the movies that are so bad, so cheesy that they are amusing, that they're funny. And Showgirls is definitely one that fits that bill, although I don't think I will ever watch it again because it's just an unpleasant watch for me. I can't even enjoy it on a camp level. And The Room, I don't think I can ever watch without the riff tracks. It's just so painfully incompetent, and I I I enjoy The Disaster Artist, but I'm just not a huge fan of. I'm just not a huge fan of that one. Um, One of course, the patron saint of So Bad It's Good is Edward D. Wood Jr. And it's funny because of the fact that I think Ed Wood, the Tim Burton film, is as much of a cult film as even Ed Wood's films are in particular. And I am the proud owner of the Ed Wood box. My mother actually got that for me for Christmas one year. It was a Media Play was going out of business, and they had box sets, they had DVDs, they had basically everything marked way down. And it was between Ed Wood, the Ed Wood box set, and a film noir box set. And she went with the Ed Wood box set, and I will always be grateful for her to doing that. Maybe I would have gotten to some of the film noir sooner than I might be. I have no idea what movies were in it, but I am so glad that I have this Ed Wood box set. It makes it easily accessible for me to watch some of these movies, to have been able to include him as one of my bookend directors for a movie a week at the time, and I've gotten through all of the movies there. The only one of his I haven't really seen is Sinister Urge, which I need to look for to see that. I mean, of course, there are his pornographic monster movies that I haven't seen either. But Ed Wood, I'm so glad that I do have those movies in the collection. I'm proud of having those movies in collection. And I mean, I can watch, and unlike The Room, I can watch Plan 9 from Outer Space without like riff tracks or something making fun of it because there's just a genuine affection to Wood's work that I think is what makes those films so enjoyable. And it's something that I think he's over time as people started to discover Ed Wood. You I think it's easier for people to see where that affection is. I mean, I think Tim Burton's biopic helps, but it's fun to see his movies sort of get rehabilitated. And I've mentioned riff tracks a couple of times, and you can certainly see it. Certainly see some of the box sets in the back here. You can see poster for it, but of course, no discussion on cult films would be complete without Mystery Science Theater 3000. Um, I've been a Misty for about 25 years. My mother and I got into it shortly before the movie came out. And I recently rewatched the movie, and it's such a blast. And I love watching those episodes, and I've enjoyed watching what I've watched of the newer ones with Jonah Ray and Felicia Day, and I enjoy riff tracks very much. And it's one of those things where that is cheesy as much as Misty is made fun of like 50s sci-fi. They're also part of the reason why I was interested in watching Flight to Mars and reviewing Flight to Mars because of the fact that I know there's good 50s sci-fi. I mean, The Day the Earth Stood Still fascinated me when I saw it. And even This Island Earth, which is the movie for the MST3K movie, is not a bad movie. It's just very dated and cheesy in what it does with its aliens and stuff like that. One filmmaker I should be mentioning here is John Mars. Unfortunately, I'm loath to admit that I don't think I've seen a single John Waters film. I want to say I've seen at least one, but I can't remember which one it would be. But I mean, other than the musical version of Hairspray, I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen any of his original films, and that's something I do want to rectify in the near future. And because obviously you have Pink Flamingos, Polyester, Hairspray, and a lot of other films of his, and I'm looking forward to eventually getting into John Waters films. So why did I choose cult movies for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat? Well, tonight I am going to be seeing the Rocky Horror Picture Show for the first time. Last year, when the plaza shut down, when all of the movie theaters shut down, I told myself that if they reopened, I would go see Rocky Horror Picture Show there. As they just started doing it a couple weeks ago. The second was the first one, but I am going tonight. And it's not a midnight movie; it's a 10 p.m. movie. But I'm really looking forward to the experience, even if I don't necessarily get all of everything with regards to that experience. I'm looking forward to witnessing that experience in my through my eyes for the first time. And I might be writing something about that tomorrow. I'm not quite sure. But I know tomorrow, though, I will be, like I said, I will be doing a lot with looking at the upcoming Blu-ray for Flight to Mars that comes out Tuesday. My review of that will be on Sunday. And I think that's all that I wanted to say right now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. I will be doing another episode on Thursday of next week at 10 p.m. I work 1 to 9, and it's already on the schedule on Twitch. And that's it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. As always, check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. Podcasts at YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and Google. As well as, of course, www.sonic-cinema.com. And thank you very much for everybody who is watching this Twitch stream and who watches it afterwards. Thank you very much.